The Sumerian tablets and the knowledge of medicinal plants. Among the Sumerian tablets, not only kings and gods were recorded. Some preserve a quieter knowledge, almost hidden among the symbols. The art of healing through plants. Ancient texts describe leaves, roots, and resins not as simple remedies, but as living entities, connected to the human body and the cycles of the earth. For the Sumerians, illness did not begin in the body, but in imbalance. And healing did not always come from ritual, but from understood nature. The tablets speak of plants gathered at precise moments. At dawn, under specific phases of the moon, in lands untouched by many feet. It was not superstition, it was method. Some remedies combined practical science and symbolism. Infusions for pain, ointments for wounds, vapors for a troubled mind. But a warning always appears. The plant heals, or destroys, depending on the knowledge of the one who uses it. The Sumerian texts attribute this wisdom to an external source. Knowledge that did not originate in the fields, but was given. The Anunnaki. According to tradition, these beings taught which plants strengthened the body, which calmed the mind, and which altered consciousness. Not only to heal, but to understand. The tablets describe sacred gardens where certain plants were forbidden to the common people. Only initiated priests and healers could enter. Not for power, but for responsibility. Modern science now recognizes that many of these plants contain real active compounds. Some are still used in medicine, others remain under study, and some remain avoided. Coincidence? Accumulated observation? Or knowledge transmitted by an advanced civilization? The story offers no certainty, only patterns, because the more the Sumerian tablets are compared with traditions from Egypt, India, and ancient America, the more the same idea appears. Nature was humanity's first laboratory. Perhaps the Anunnaki did not give magic. Perhaps they gave method. Or perhaps they simply awakened something humans had forgotten how to hear. Because before modern medicine, there existed a medicine that listened to the earth. The Sumerian tablets and the secret of contact with the earth. Among the Sumerian tablets, there are not only records of kings, wars, and gods. Some contain quieter fragments, almost forgotten, that describe the direct relationship between the human body and the earth. Texts that claim human balance did not depend solely on rituals or prayers, but on physical contact with the ground, metals, and natural elements. For the Sumerians, the body was not separate from the world. It was a conductor. The tablets describe unusual practices. Sleeping with one bare foot touching the ground, sitting on living stone, walking barefoot at dawn. Not as poverty, not as punishment, but as balance. According to these texts, the earth absorbed an invisible excess of tension from the body. A silent discharge, an inner recalibration. Today, some would call this symbolic, others, primitive intuition. But the Sumerians recorded it as transmitted knowledge. The same principle appears in their obsession with metals. Gold, silver, and copper were not merely symbols of power. They were living materials. Copper was associated with flow, silver with mental clarity, gold with stability and permanence. The tablets insist they were not used for luxury, but for resonance. Temples were lined with metals. Priests carried conductive objects. Kings slept surrounded by them. But the answer always appears wrapped in the same unsettling phrase. This was taught to us by those who descended from the heavens. The Anunnaki. According to Sumerian tradition, these beings did not only teach how to build cities or rule kingdoms. They taught how the human body functions in relation to the energy of the earth. a form of knowledge that today would stand at the boundary between biology, physics, and psychology, but which was then considered sacred science. For some modern researchers, these practices were nothing more than symbolic rituals. For others, an intuitive understanding of natural electrical fields. And for the most daring, knowledge inherited from a non-human civilization. The story does not claim, but it does not deny. It simply leaves the question suspended. What if the ancients knew something the modern world forgot? Perhaps that is why they walked barefoot. Perhaps that is why they touched the earth. Perhaps that is why gold was never just wealth, but memory. Because before mastering the world, they learned to listen to it. What is the Sumerian king list? Among the ruins of ancient Sumer, a text survives that challenges logic, time, and human memory. A record carved in clay that does not merely list kings but impossible ages. The Sumerian king list begins with a disturbing statement. When kingship descended from heaven, it was not born among humans. It descended. According to the text, the first kings did not rule for decades, but for thousands of years. Al-Yalim, the first, reigned for more than 28,000 years. Others ruled even longer. They did not age. They did not fall ill. They were not remembered as ordinary men. For some scholars, this proves the numbers were symbolic. For others, that time itself was understood differently. And for a few, that these kings were not human, at least not as we are. The list then reaches a crucial moment, Great Flood, a catastrophe that divides two worlds. Before the flood, nearly eternal kings. After the flood, mortal rulers, with reigns that grew shorter and shorter. Coincidence or memory of a real event? Science suggests political propaganda, a way to legitimize power by linking it to the divine. Archaeology confirms the authenticity of the tablets. Yet no explanation fully erases the feeling that something was lost between the lines. And the most unsettling part is this: Sumer was not alone. In Mesoamerica, the Maya spoke of previous worlds destroyed, of gods who ruled before humanity. The Aztecs told of ancient suns, worlds created and erased. In the Andes, the Inca remembered the Viracocha, beings who came before the current age. Cultures separated by oceans, yet united by the same idea. There was a time before history. Is it myth? Distorted memory? Or fragments of a truth humanity can no longer fully understand? The Sumerian king list claims that power came from heaven, but at the same time, it plants doubt. Because the more one reads, the less clear it becomes where history ends, and where legend begins. And perhaps that doubt is the true message that survived time. The mysterious list of the Sumerian kings. In the lands where the first cities were born, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the sages of Sumer left behind a record that still unsettles the modern world. It was not an ordinary chronicle. It was a list that defied human logic. They called it the Sumerian king list. The text claimed that before the Great Flood, kings did not rule for years, but for tens of thousands of years. Their names were not merely political titles, but symbols of a power believed to have descended from the heavens. The list begins with a disturbing sentence. When kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was an Eridu. For the ancient Sumerians, power did not rise from the people, but from the divine realm. The earliest kings were not only men, they were intermediaries between the gods and humanity. One king is said to have ruled for 28,800 years, another for 36,000 years. Lengths of reign impossible according to modern human biology. For centuries, Scholars believed these numbers were symbolic or mythical exaggerations. Yet the list was discovered engraved on clay tablets, copied repeatedly by scribes from different cities, suggesting it was not a single isolated legend. Modern science proposes that these reigns may represent astronomical cycles, sacred dynasties, or symbolic measurements of time. Ancient religious traditions, however, claimed that the world before the flood was fundamentally different, and that human life was not bound by the limits known today. After the flood, the list changes abruptly. The reigns become shorter. The kings begin to appear more human. The text quietly suggests a transition, the passage from a divine age to an age of men. Some of the names appear again in other Mesopotamian myths. Others vanish without explanation, as if erased from the memory of the world. The list records more than kings. It carries a silent warning. When power no longer descends from heaven, humanity begins to fight to control it on earth. To this day, the Sumerian king list is studied not only as history, but as a bridge between myth, religion, and science. An echo of a time when humans believed the gods walked among them. And perhaps, according to the ancients, they were not mistaken. Enoch, the prophecy of time. Before the flood, before Moses, before history was written as we know it, there was Enoch. The Bible says Enoch did not die, that he walked with God and vanished. But the ancient texts attributed to Enoch reveal something far more unsettling. He was not only taken to heaven, he was shown the nature of time itself. According to these writings, Enoch was guided by angels known as the Watchers through the heavens. There he did not merely see stars and thrones, he witnessed the hidden mechanism of time. Cycles, ages, resets of the world, and repeated judgments. Past, present, and future were not separate, they were part of a single design. Enoch wrote that humanity would pass through eras marked by corruption, forbidden knowledge, and false enlightenment. He spoke of a time when humans would believe they controlled everything, yet would have forgotten who created them. A time when the heavens would seem silent yet would be watching. The most feared prophecy did not speak of an end, but of a return to the beginning, a reset. A moment when what was hidden would be revealed, and sealed books would be opened once again. Enoch warned that only those who understood time would recognize the signs. That is why his writings were removed, fragmented, and pushed to the margins of history. Not because they were false, but because they were too precise. And if Enoch truly saw our time, then the question is not whether the prophecy will be fulfilled, but where we now stand on the clock of creation. The story will continue in future chapters. The Haggadah of the Silence of the Desert. The pages of the ancient Haggadah open once more, and the miniatures reveal a barren, unmarked landscape. Naked hills, cracked stones, and an unmoving sky surround a solitary figure walking slowly forward. No written words explain the silence. The image itself holds it. Jesus enters the desert. There are no crowds, no witnesses. The sound of the Jordan's waters is now far behind. Only the wind brushes against sand and stone. Each step raises dust. The sun measures time without mercy. Days pass without visible signs. Hunger appears gradually, not suddenly, becoming a constant presence. The body weakens, but the gaze remains steady. The desert offers no shelter and no distraction. Everything is exposed. In the absolute stillness, the trials arise. They do not arrive with noise, but with calm, reasonable words. the promise of bread, of power, of safety. Each proposal seems simple, logical, almost necessary. Yet in the silence, the answers form without being spoken aloud. Jesus stands unmoved before each challenge. He does not argue. He does not rush. The desert watches. The sand does not stir. The sky does not change. Strength is not born from force, but from clarity. Time stretches. The silence weighs heavily, yet it also reveals. When all that is unnecessary falls away, only what is essential remains. And that is enough. At last, the desert yields not with words, but with stillness. Hunger remains, weariness remains, but the trial has passed. The solitude has fulfilled its purpose. Jesus leaves the desert in the same way he entered it, in silence. The story now moves toward a new stage, where silence will give way to voices, roads, and callings. The next chapter leads to the beginning of his public ministry. For centuries, one question has sparked faith, doubt, and debate. Did Jesus of Nazareth really exist? Beyond religion, history offers disturbingly clear answers. The earliest records do not come from the Bible, but from Roman historians. Tacitus, one of the most respected chroniclers of the Roman Empire, wrote that Jesus was executed under the authority of Pontius Pilate. He was not a Christian. He had no reason to invent such a claim. Pliny the Younger, a Roman governor, described early Christian communities who worshipped Christ as a god. Only decades after his death, and Flavius Josephus, a 1st-century Jewish historian, referred to Jesus as a wise man, executed, and followed by many even after his death. These independent sources agree on the essentials. Jesus lived, he was crucified, and his impact was undeniable. Archaeology speaks as well. Roman inscriptions confirm the existence of Pontius Pilate. Physical evidence of 1st-century crucifixions shows that the method described in the Gospels was historically accurate. Even science enters the discussion. Modern textual analysis reveals that the Gospels were written too close to the events to be mere legends. Ancient manuscripts align with one another with remarkable consistency. But there is one argument that goes beyond documents. A carpenter with no army, no wealth, and no throne changed the calendar, reshaped morality, and altered the course of civilization. That is not the work of a simple myth. Jesus was not a legend born in darkness. He was a real man, in a real time, with real consequences. And perhaps that is why, 2,000 years later, his existence remains impossible to erase. The story will continue in future chapters. The spear of Christ, the weapon that touched the divine. As the body of Jesus hung in silence upon the cross, the sky darkened and the earth trembled. Then came an act that would echo through history. A Roman soldier, identified in ancient tradition as Longinus, pierced the side of Jesus with his spear. From the wound flowed blood and water. To some, it was merely the final act of an execution. To others, it was the exact moment when the human world touched the divine. Apocryphal manuscripts and medieval traditions claim that the spear was not abandoned. It was taken, preserved, and feared. According to these texts, the spear acquired an unsettling power. Whoever possessed it could rise to rule empires, but whoever lost it was destined to fall. Centuries later, the Holy Spear appears in the hands of Emperors Constantine, Charlemagne, and later within the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. Ancient chronicles claim each carried it into battle, believing the weapon protected their destiny. But other manuscripts offer a darker warning. The spear did not grant power, it revealed it. They say the blood of Christ did not turn the weapon into a blessing, but into a test measuring human ambition against the sacred. When power was sought, the spear brought war. When it was revered, it brought silence. And here, the question is born. In the next chapter, we will explore how many spears claim to be the true one, and why none can prove its origin with absolute certainty. Later, we will uncover how sacred relics became tools of political ambition, and why touching the divine always carries a price. Because the spear that pierced Christ is not just a relic. It is a mirror. It does not reveal the power of God, but the heart of humanity.
Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Truly this was a righteous man.
Long before the arrival of Columbus, there is a theory that challenges official history. The Knights Templar may have reached the Americas. After the dissolution of the Templar Order in 1307, accused of heresy and hunted by the Church and European kings, many Templars vanished without a trace. But their treasures were never found. According to ancient chronicles and hidden symbols, some Templars may have escaped by sea, carrying secret maps, advanced navigational knowledge, and relics considered sacred and dangerous. There are clues that fuel the mystery. In North America, certain ancient structures display symbols similar to Templar crosses. In Nova Scotia, the mystery of Oak Island has long been linked to a hidden Templar treasure. And in Mesoamerica, some legends speak of bearded men arriving from the sea, long before the conquistadors. Coincidence? Or traces erased by time? The Templars possessed knowledge of sacred geometry, advanced architecture, and a spiritual vision that blended faith and science. Some believe this knowledge was shared with indigenous cultures, influencing symbols, rituals, and constructions. There is no definitive proof, but there are no clear explanations either. If the Templars reached the Americas, they did not come as conquerors, but as guardians, hiding secrets that could not fall into the wrong hands. And then a disturbing revelation emerges. An ancient manuscript, found in forgotten European archives, describes a Templar voyage to a land beyond the ocean, mentioning sacred mountains, giant stones, and people who had never seen iron. The document names no modern places, yet its descriptions align unsettlingly with regions of the American continent. Was this manuscript the missing proof? Or just another fragment of a forbidden puzzle? Perhaps the story of the New World began much earlier than we were taught, because sometimes the truth is not lost. It is hidden. The story will continue in future chapters. The day the angels abandoned the wall. On the eastern wall, before dawn, Constantinople breathed with difficulty. The city seemed like a wounded body, knowing that the light would bring war. The air smelled of salt, iron, and ancient incense. No voices were heard, only whispered prayers. For generations, it was believed that the city was protected by angels. Invisible guardians walked along the walls, sword in hand, watching over the empire chosen by God. So the priests taught. So the soldiers repeated. So the people accepted. The night before, the relics were raised before the sea. Psalms echoed until voices were hoarse. Yet something was different. Candles extinguished themselves. The wind blew from the city's interior, not from the enemy camp. Some called it a warning. No one listened. As the sky began to lighten, movement appeared atop the wall. They were not men. Tall, silent shadows advanced slowly toward the city, not the enemy. No wings were seen, yet their presence pressed like stone upon the hearts of those who watched. One by one, the shadows vanished. They did not descend. They did not fight. They retreated. At that moment, the bells of a nearby church rang without hands touching them. Then they fell silent, forever. Then the attack began. The enemy advanced with a certainty never seen before. Every arrow found its target. Every strike seemed guided. Defensive projectiles fell into the sea as if they had lost their purpose. The walls, which had withstood centuries, began to give way as if something invisible had abandoned them. By evening, the wall still stood, but it was no longer the same. It was not empty of men, it was empty of faith. That night, the chronicle was written to bear witness, not as an accusation, but as a warning. For on the day the angels abandoned the wall, it became clear that not every defeat begins with a sword. Some begin in the heavens. Marco Polo in America before Columbus. According to official history, Marco Polo never crossed the Atlantic Ocean. His journeys ended in Asia, and his name became forever linked to the Silk Road. But an ancient manuscript, dated to the late 13th century, suggests something impossible. Marco Polo may have reached America nearly 200 years before Columbus. The text, written in archaic Latin mixed with nautical symbols, describes a voyage beyond the Sea of Darkness. It speaks of unfamiliar ocean currents, stars positioned differently in the night sky, and vast green lands inhabited by peoples who did not use iron, yet mastered gold and maize. The traveler never names the continent. Instead, he calls it the Great Land of the West, where the sun dies and is reborn. He describes immense rivers, endless jungles, and cities built from stone and clay. Some passages align disturbingly well with what we now know of Mesoamerican and Andean civilizations. Why was this account never revealed? The manuscript hints that the knowledge was deliberately suppressed for political and economic reasons. To admit that Europe already knew of these lands would have rewritten the balance of power, faith, and conquest. At the end of the document, a marginal note written in a different hand delivers a warning. Not all journeys are meant to be remembered. Some must remain silent until the world is prepared. If this manuscript is authentic, the discovery of America was not an accident, it was a revelation delayed by centuries. The story will continue in future chapters. The Haggadah of the First Miracles. The pages of the ancient Haggadah open once more, and the miniatures reveal scenes that seem to break the rhythm of ordinary life. Jars, tables, roads, and gathering crowds repeat across the images, yet something different begins to surface in each one, as if the familiar world were on the verge of transformation. It begins with a simple gathering, a celebration, mingled voices, vessels set in place. Nothing unusual is expected. The moment moves forward until scarcity becomes evident. What sustained the joy has run out. There is no public announcement, no dramatic gesture, only a brief, quiet instruction. The change occurs without noise. The contents of the vessels are no longer the same. Those who taste pause. Surprise is not expressed in shouts, but in glances searching for explanation. Abundance appears where there had been limit. Along the roads, other gestures follow. The touch, a word, a presence close at hand. Weakened bodies regain movement. Eyes once closed are opened. There is no delay. What had been held back begins to flow. The news spreads uncontrollably. Footsteps quicken. Houses fill. Some arrive with clear faith, others with doubt. The miracle does not distinguish intentions, it simply happens. Jesus does not linger to explain. The signs speak for themselves. Each action points to something greater, something that does not impose itself, yet allows itself to be seen. While some celebrate, others watch with unease. Questions grow. What heals also unsettles. What astonishes demands a response. Thus, the first miracles do not close the story, they open it. They prepare the ground for more demanding words and deeper encounters. The narrative now moves toward a moment when teaching will take a public and structured form. The next chapter leads to the Sermon on the Mount. The Haggadah of the Nativity. The pages of the ancient Haggadah open once more, and the illustrations come alive. Within the illuminated miniatures, a long road winds through stone villages and open fields. Two figures move slowly beneath a vast sky, traveling from Nazareth toward Bethlehem. The journey is heavy with distance and uncertainty. Night approaches and the land grows quiet. Mary walks beside Joseph. Her steps are measured,